I was already behind on bills when the letter came. Not bills I ignored, just the kind that sat on the kitchen table unopened, next to two mugs I hadn't washed and a charger cable I kept stepping over. I wasn't living badly, just overwhelmed. I worked evenings at a downtown logistics office. Nothing fancy, mostly forms, signatures, and appeasing angry emails. My phone battery was always low. So was my patience. That morning, I found the envelope wedged between a pizza flyer and an energy bill. Cream-colored. Embossed. Not the kind of letter people like me received. It was addressed to my family name. Not me specifically, just Mr. Thorne. No first name. Nothing else. I almost tossed it. Almost. But the weight of it was strange. Thick paper. Heavy seal. A gold emblem stamped on the back. I opened it at the sink, half watching coffee drip into a chipped mug. I wasn't prepared for what I read. Not even close. Notice of collection. Fulfillment of legacy obligation in accordance with the terms of agreement number 39A, dated April 18, 1998. The bearer of the Thorne family debt is hereby summoned to fulfill a 90-day service period under the guardianship of Madam Adelaide V. Harrow at St. Ives Finishing College. Attendance is mandatory. Refusal transfers liability to surviving family members. I read it twice. Then a third time. I thought it was a scam. A prank. Some weird fake scholarship. Then I saw the notarized stamp. A contact number. A legal watermark that disappeared when I tilted the page. My father's name written in an annex section near the bottom, dated 27 years ago. A contract. A debt. Something he signed, apparently, before I was even old enough to ride a bike. And somehow it had come to me. I called the number. A woman answered with the sort of voice that didn't ask if you were confused. She simply confirmed that my attendance was required. That transportation would be arranged. That Madam Harrow expected punctuality, and that my compliance would fully erase the debt, but my absence would legally transfer the entire amount to my mother. It wasn't the money that got me. It was the image of my mother, still working 2 shifts a week in her 60s, picking up my punishment because of something my father forgot to mention before he died. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, a second letter arrived. Simpler. Colder. It listed what I was to bring. No electronics. No outside clothing. No personal grooming products. Just identification and silence. I didn't know what St. Ives Finishing College was. I didn't care. I packed a single bag and set my alarm for 5:30 a.m. And I kept rereading the final line of the letter until it burned into me. Attendance is mandatory. Refusal transfers liability to the family. I didn't expect the car. A black town car, glossy, with a driver who knew my name but never asked for ID. The ride was long. Out of the city, past the suburbs, into green hills where phone signal thinned and time felt slower. I didn't speak. Neither did he. The silence was heavier than any music could have been. When the gates came into view, I felt my throat go dry. White stone. Gold trim. An emblem I'd seen before on the letter. St. Ives Finishing College. There was nothing remotely college about it. It looked like a private estate carved out of a painting. Manicured hedges shaped into spirals. Water fountains dancing in silence. Not a student in sight. Just the hush of wealth and order. The car stopped in front of a staircase flanked by 2 marble statues, women, tall and poised, one with a book, the other with a mirror. I didn't want to get out. But the door opened, and the driver only said, "You're expected." Inside was cooler. Wide halls. Soft cream walls. Golden sconces. Every surface was clean in a way that didn't feel lived in, like this place wasn't a building. It was a performance. Then I saw her. She stood at the end of the hallway like she'd been waiting there for hours. Not young, not old, timeless in the way certain women are. Silver gray hair pulled into a tight twist. A dress that fit like sculpture. Her presence hit me like gravity. "Mr. Thorne," she said. Not a question. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. She turned and walked. I followed without being told to. We entered a room that looked like a private gallery. Books behind glass, velvet furniture, soft lighting that made you feel exposed no matter where you sat. She did not offer me a seat. She remained standing. I am Madam Adelaide Harrow. You will refer to me as Madam. You will not ask questions. You will not require sympathy. I finally found my voice. It came out harsh. I didn't agree to this. Her expression didn't change. The contract was signed. The debt is yours. This is insane. I'm not some servant. I'm not doing dishes for 90 days. She stepped closer, slow, composed, not angry. Just impossibly still. This is not servitude, Mr. Thorne, she said. This is refinement. A process. And you are not here to be broken. You are here to be finished. I wanted to laugh. I didn't. Her eyes told me not to. She handed me a document. My schedule. It was minute by minute. Wake 5:45. Physical preparation. Silence. Breakfast. Posture class. Conversational drills. Dining conduct. Wardrobe theory. Dismissal 8:45 p.m. Lights out 9 o'clock. You will eat what is served, she continued. You will sleep when dismissed. You will wear what is given. And when the 90 days are over, you will leave with no debt. Should you choose to leave earlier, the financial responsibility returns to your mother with interest. That hit harder than the gate. You may speak freely tonight. From tomorrow, you speak only when prompted. I swallowed. What happens if I mess up? Her voice dropped, calm and cold. You will not. She turned and walked out. I stood there holding the schedule like a prison sentence printed on linen paper. The door behind me clicked shut without a sound. I was alone. And for the first time in years, I was absolutely sure of one thing. I was not in control anymore. They took my bag, the first night. I wasn't allowed to keep it in my room, a small, quiet space with a single bed, no clock, no phone, and no mirror. Just a wooden wardrobe, a writing desk with nothing on it, and a soft blue lamp that dimmed automatically at 9. No locks on the door. No curtains either. At 5:45 the next morning, a soft chime echoed through the hallway. I was already awake, staring at the ceiling. By 6:10 I was standing in a long corridor with 6 other men, all about my age, maybe older. No one spoke. Not even a glance. We wore matching gray drawstring trousers and cream-colored tunics that fit like paper hospital gowns. The fabric was stiff. The collars high. The discomfort intentional. The first lesson was posture. A woman with her hair in a tight braid walked the length of the corridor, correcting us with a slender rod. She tapped gently against shoulders, wrists, and backs. She didn't introduce herself. Didn't explain anything. Just touched and adjusted. Chin down. Back aligned. Hands folded, never dangling. That was the tone for the day. Meals were served in silence. We were seated before the food arrived. Always the same portion. Always arranged beautifully. You didn't touch anything until the instructor nodded. You chewed with precision. You swallowed before speaking, even if you had nothing to say. Not that anyone dared. After meals came walking drills, long marble halls with lines drawn faintly on the floor. We were taught heel-toe balance, pace regulation, and turning without twisting the torso. It felt ridiculous. I laughed once, quietly, when I stumbled. The instructor's eyes froze on me. You may leave if you're unfit for grace, she said flatly. That shut me up fast. By the 3rd day, we were issued uniforms. They weren't feminine. Not yet. Just strange beige slacks with invisible seams. Fitted tops that buttoned up the back. Everything gender-neutral, but oddly snug, tailored to make you aware of every breath, every movement. And if it didn't fit right, it was your fault, not the clothes. Mistakes were never scolded. Just corrected. If your fingers fidgeted, an instructor placed a teacup in your hands and made you hold it without shaking for 5 minutes. If your voice was too loud, you were sent to walk laps in silence until you found a softer register. If you sat too wide, your chair was removed and replaced with a stool so narrow it punished poor posture instantly. It wasn't punishment. Not directly. It was consequence. And yet I kept telling myself the same thing. 90 days. Just 90 days. I can take anything for 90 days. But there was something else beginning to gnaw at me. Not fear, not shame, something subtler. I'd gone from chaos to order overnight. And part of me, the part one didn't want to admit existed, was already breathing easier in the structure. It started with an envelope left on my desk after posture class. My name handwritten on the front in perfect calligraphy. Inside, a folded schedule and a single typed sentence. Grooming compliance is now required for presentation coherence. See room 4A at 6 o'clock. I stared at it for a long time. No explanation. No discussion. Just required. The phrase presentation coherence made my stomach turn.
It wasn't about me.
It was about how I looked through their lens. Not as a man, not as myself, but as something being adjusted, reshaped, prepared. I considered not going. But the rules were clear. Refusal rerouted consequences back home to my mother. So I showed up. Room 4A was white, clinical, softly lit. No windows. One long cushioned table in the center. Cabinets along the wall. It smelled like lavender and alcohol. A woman waited inside in pale blue scrubs, her dark hair pinned up. She smiled, but it wasn't kindness. Just protocol. Please remove your tunic and lie down, she said. I hesitated. She didn't. I'll begin with legs, she added, already pulling on gloves. What followed was the most surreal hour of my life. First, a full leg wax. No small talk. No warning before each strip. Then arms, chest, stomach, back. She worked methodically, wiping, soothing, moving on. I flinched once, and she paused just long enough to say, "Try to stay still. It's easier if you relax." There was nothing erotic, nothing indulgent. Just sterilized, procedural removal of what made me feel like me. After the waxing came exfoliation. Sugar scrubs. Moisturizers. Creams that tingled and burned. Then a facial steam. A mask. Cold rollers that made my skin feel tighter than I remembered. She adjusted my head gently to the side and brushed something across my eyebrows. Then she moved to my hands. Each nail was shaped, filed, buffed. Cuticles pushed. Skin softened with oil. A subtle sheen applied. Not polished.
Not yet.
Just clean. Impossibly clean. When she was finished, she wiped her gloves, gestured toward the mirror on the far wall, the first mirror I'd seen since arriving, and said simply, "You may dress now." I walked over slowly. My skin felt too light, too exposed. The clothes slid over me differently. And when I looked at my reflection, I saw hands that weren't mine. They looked like they belonged to someone precise. Someone gentle. Someone who wanted to be seen. I held them up and stared at them like they were false, like I could shake them off. But they stayed. And what scared me most wasn't the smoothness, or the softness, or the way my arms looked hairless under the thin sleeves. What scared me most was that part of me didn't hate it. The envelope this time was pale lavender. Same script, same weight. Inside, a schedule slot simply labeled 9 a.m. wardrobe orientation. Location, East Wing, Level 2. The East Wing was different. Warmer. Quieter. The lighting dimmed at the edges like a museum. Glass cases displayed items I hadn't seen since arriving. Heels, silk gloves, vintage corsets, evening gowns in deep regal shades. Not costumes. Not playful. Instruments. The woman who met me there was dressed immaculately in slate gray. Her lipstick the color of dried rose petals. She looked me over without greeting, then gestured toward the dressing suite with a clipboard in hand. "We begin with foundations," she said. "Everything structured begins beneath the surface." What followed was not humiliation. It was precision. First, undergarments, chosen for fit, not fashion. Soft but firm high-waisted briefs. A compression top that shaped posture, aligning the spine. Stockings attached to subtle garters sewn into the waistline. She handed me a robe and turned away while I dressed, but somehow the act still felt seen. Then the dress. Structured. Heavy. Not flowy or delicate, tailored to train. The sleeves narrowed at the elbow, forcing upright arms. The waist cinched just enough to prevent slouching. The hemline hit mid-calf. Weight at the bottom to discourage rushing or wide strides. Movement became mindful.
You may walk, she said.
I took a step. Wobbled. Again. I took another. Again. I began to understand. The weight wasn't just physical. It was instructional. The garments made choices for me. They corrected without speaking. Sitting was next. A narrow-backed chair. Bend only from the knees. Keep ankles together. Back never touches the seat. It was harder than any gym workout I'd ever done. By the third hour, my legs ached. My spine throbbed. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted a porcelain teacup without spilling. She made no comment, just took notes. Then she brought out shoes. Low heels, dark and narrow. Not decorative. Corrective. They changed everything about how I stepped, how I shifted my weight, how my hips subtly adjusted with each move. I didn't walk. I was guided forward. You fidget when you're unsure, she noted quietly, almost to herself. Your shoulders hide your height. That must change. I nodded, ashamed. And yet, grateful someone noticed. By the end, I sat alone on the dressing bench. Hands folded. Skirt tucked precisely. Eyes forward. No mirror this time, just the awareness of fabric touching skin in ways I hadn't expected to feel. Calming. The shame hadn't left. It was still there, pulsing beneath the surface. But it was competing now with something else. Focus. And focus, I realized, could silence shame. At least for a while. They called it visual discipline. Not beauty. Not transformation. Not femininity. Just another module in the program, like posture or dining etiquette. And yet I could feel my resistance rearing the moment I read the term on my new schedule. Room 2C. This time, a tall pale space with a row of vanities, each lit evenly, the bulbs casting a. No chatter. Just the soft rustling of brushes and the occasional click of a compact being opened. No mirrors yet. Not until they deemed us ready for reflection. The instructor, another madam, this one with angular cheekbones and eyes like polished slate, addressed us calmly. Your face is no longer private, she said. It is part of your presence. Presentation begins before speech. You will learn how to control your effect. Each of us was assigned a station. On mine, a tray with brushes, sponges, a compact powder, cream blush, and lip tint the shade of soft coral. Neutral. Undeniable. We do not color the face, she continued. We structure it. You will apply according to the guide shown on the wall. No creativity. No commentary. You are not artists. You are students of precision. And so we began. Primer. Foundation. Powder. The brush felt foreign in my hand. My movements were clumsy. Unsure. The instructor corrected my hand posture before I even finished my first cheek. She did not speak. She simply touched, adjusted, nodded. Blush applied at a precise angle to lift the face. Lip tint pressed in with fingertips. Brows brushed upward, not darkened. Nothing exaggerated. Everything meant to soften, to quiet, to refine. No mirrors still. Only silence and direction. Then came the wigs. They were not presented as accessories. They were presented as assignments, each chosen by the staff based on head shape, facial symmetry, and skin tone. Mine was mid-length, chestnut brown, parted slightly to the left. The strands were unnervingly soft. It didn't look like a costume piece. It looked real. Realer than I wanted it to. The instructor placed it on me with careful hands, adjusted the line of the part, tucked a piece behind one ear. This is what suits you, she said. Do not touch it without permission. I sat still, heartbeat louder than my thoughts. Voice training followed. We weren't told to sound like women. That would have been too crude for this place. Instead, we were taught breath control, pacing, reduction of volume, avoiding uptalk, delaying reactions by half a beat to create softness in tone. They recorded us reading the same paragraph daily. We weren't allowed to listen. Only the staff did. Each day we received subtle tweaks. Less tension. Less haste. Then, one afternoon near the end of the second week, after I finished my makeup and speech repetition, I heard it. You're improving. I turned, startled. It was Madame Harrow, standing at the back of the room, arms folded, observing as she always did, silently, invisibly, until she wasn't. I wasn't sure about you, she added, but you're beginning to listen. That is progress. It wasn't praise. Not exactly. But it hit harder than any of the corrections. I swallowed, nodding once. That evening, back in my room, I finally saw my reflection. A mirror had been added to the wall, subtle, tall, quiet. And what stared back wasn't a stranger. But not someone I fully knew either. Not a man. Not yet a woman. Just someone being finished. I stopped counting days sometime around week 5. Not on purpose. Not as an act of surrender. It just slipped away. There was a morning I woke up and realized I hadn't marked the calendar on the back of my notebook. I hadn't even thought about how many mornings were left. I just rose, dressed, and moved into the day, as if it were my place. As if I belonged. The correction slowed. Not because they stopped noticing, but because I started correcting myself before they had to. My hands folded instinctively when I stood still. My chin adjusted mid-sentence. I sipped before I spoke. Paused before I answered. It didn't feel like obedience. It felt like peace. My body, once stiff with defiance, had softened into posture. Not weak. Just quiet. Aligned. Meals became smoother. Conversation drills, once a minefield of hesitation, became rhythm. I knew which fork to use without thinking. I could recite art critiques, fashion history, or wine pairings in a tone calm enough to land in any drawing room without embarrassment. But the moment it truly clicked, the emotional pivot came unexpectedly. That evening, I returned to my room after a long day of rehearsed social interactions and scheduled silence. The light had already shifted to that soft gold they used after 8 p.m., and everything felt still. I was fully prepared. Hair styled. Lips tinted with a soft mauve. Dress ironed. Posture precise. I had just come from a mock salon where we'd practiced hosting high-tea introductions for visiting patrons. I hadn't looked at myself during it. We weren't allowed. But now, back in my room, I turned toward the mirror. Not to check. Not to fix. Just to see. And what I saw wasn't a disguise. It wasn't a mask. It was me.
Poised. Soft. Centered.
Hair resting perfectly against my shoulders. Eyebrows shaped just enough to guide my expression. Collarbone peeking from a modest neckline. My hands, those same hands I'd once buried in hoodie sleeves, resting on my lap like they had always known where to go. I studied the person in the mirror for a long time, and something caught in my chest. Not grief. Not pride. Just stillness. I wasn't performing anymore. I wasn't surviving. I was present. It dawned on me then, this wasn't about debt. This wasn't about my mother or my father or the contract. Graduation wasn't freedom. Graduation was mastery. They weren't finishing me for them. They were teaching me how to hold myself, even after the doors opened again. And for the first time since arriving, I whispered aloud to my reflection. I don't want to go back. Graduation wasn't a ceremony. It was an assessment. A quiet, measured unfolding over 3 days. The envelope arrived with gold lettering this time. Inside, a schedule for final evaluation, presentation protocol, reflection expectations, and a note that read, "Your training is complete. Your presence will now be tested." I wasn't nervous. Not exactly. I'd long passed the point where I was trying to pass. Now, I just wanted to be still enough not to betray how much I cared. We were evaluated in every category, not by instructors but by visiting guests, alumni, and silent observers. Dining fluency.
Posture.
Eye contact.
Diction.
Wardrobe mastery. Hosting confidence. One by one, in long silent rooms with too many eyes and no mirrors. I wore a navy blue ensemble that fit like breath, high collar, cinched waist, elegant drape. My wig pinned carefully. My lips painted with a muted rose. Everything about me was aligned, balanced. Not performative. Not feminine. Not masculine. Just finished. When the final bell chimed on the 3rd day, I exhaled in a way I hadn't realized I'd been holding back for weeks. That night, we gathered in the common salon for the first time allowed to speak freely. Most chose not to. Not out of fear. Out of stillness. Madame Harrow entered without announcement, as she always did. She stood before us and spoke softly. You have fulfilled your contracts. The debt is cleared. Your presence has been reclaimed. Then she handed each of us a letter, embossed, sealed. Inside mine, you may return to your life, or remain connected as an alumna. The door closes behind you, unless you choose to leave it open. No pressure. No command. Just an opening. A thread. The next morning, the car waited. I walked toward it, not as a man, not as a woman, not as a debtor, but as someone who had once belonged to chaos and now carried structure in their bones. The staff did not say goodbye. That wasn't their way. As I stepped into the sunlight, the hem of my coat lifted slightly in the breeze. My heels clicked softly on the stone path. My fingers, polished, poised, rested calmly at my side. I did not look back. Not because I wasn't curious, but because I knew I could never fully go back.